The coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down, her hand trembling just slightly. Viktor Castellan noticed everything. The way she kept her cardigan buttoned despite the warm office, how she never quite met his eyes, the way she flinched when footsteps approached too quickly. But it was the split-second glimpse of discoloration on her collarbone when she reached up to adjust the window blinds that made his decision. Elena Reeves was under his protection now, whether she knew it or not. Viktor Castellan didn't do spontaneity. At 5:42 a.m., he stood in his private gym on the top floor of his Boston penthouse, running through a precise routine he'd perfected over 20 years. Every movement calculated, every breath controlled. He was a man who built an empire on reading people, the micro-expressions that betrayed lies, the tension in shoulders that revealed fear, the slight shift in posture that signaled aggression. He'd learned these skills the hard way, growing up in South Boston when it was still dangerous, when survival meant being smarter and more observant than everyone else. His father had been a dock worker who drank too much. His mother had cleaned houses for wealthy families in Beacon Hill. Viktor had watched both of them break themselves trying to make ends meet, and he'd promised himself he'd never be that powerless. Now, at 42, he owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Boston. His legitimate businesses generated millions annually. His less legitimate ventures generated considerably more. He had politicians in his pocket, judges who owed him favors, and a network of loyal people who understood that working for Viktor Castellan meant protection, good pay, and absolute discretion. But it also meant Viktor noticed things. He paid attention. He saw patterns where others saw coincidence. So when Elena Reeves entered his office at exactly 6:30 a.m. with his breakfast tray, he noticed the differences immediately. The cardigan was new, thick, high-necked, unseasonable for September in Boston. She wore it buttoned to her throat, despite the fact that his office temperature was set to a comfortable 72 degrees. The fabric looked expensive, cashmere maybe, but it hung on her frame like she'd lost weight recently. Viktor cataloged these details automatically, the way he cataloged everything about the people in his orbit. "Good morning, Mr. Castellan," she said, her voice steady but quiet, always quiet. In the 4 months she'd worked for him, he'd never heard Elena raise her voice, never heard her laugh freely, never seen her truly relaxed. In the 4 months she'd worked for him, Elena had been nothing but professional, efficient, almost invisible in the way the best personal assistants learn to be. She managed his schedule with military precision, handled his correspondence with tact and discretion, kept his private life running smoothly without ever intruding on it. She anticipated his needs before he articulated them, remembered details about clients and business partners that even Viktor sometimes forgot, and maintained absolute confidentiality about everything she saw and heard. She was, in short, perfect at her job, which made the fear in her eyes all the more noticeable to someone like Viktor, who'd spent decades reading people. "Morning, Elena." He set down the file he'd been reviewing, a property acquisition in the Seaport District, and watched her approach. She placed the tray on his desk with practiced care. Fresh fruit arranged in a precise pattern, whole grain toast cut diagonally, black coffee in the specific Italian porcelain cup he preferred, heated to exactly 180 degrees. She knew he tested it once with a thermometer when she first started, and she'd never gotten the temperature wrong since. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, efficient, no wasted motion, no unnecessary flourishes. But when she reached up to adjust the Venetian blinds that filtered the morning sunlight streaming in from the east-facing windows, her cardigan shifted. Just for a moment, maybe 2 seconds. A bloom of purple and yellow spread across her collarbone, stark against her pale skin, disappearing beneath the fabric. Old enough to have faded from the deep, angry purple of fresh bruising to those sickly shades of yellow-green and brown that meant it was at least a week old, maybe 10 days. The mark was large, spreading from just below her throat toward her shoulder. Not the kind of bruise you got from bumping into something. The kind you got from impact, from force. Elena caught him looking and immediately adjusted her collar, her fingers moving with the kind of automatic precision that spoke of practice. She'd done this before, many times. The movement was reflexive, ingrained. Pull the collar up, adjust the fabric, hide the evidence. All in less than 3 seconds. Smooth enough that most people wouldn't even notice she'd done it. But Viktor wasn't most people. "Will you need anything else this morning?" she asked, already turning toward the door. Her body language screamed escape. Shoulders angled away, weight shifted toward the exit, hands clasped in front of her in a defensive posture. "Elena," Viktor's voice was quiet but firm. Not loud. He never needed to be loud. Volume was what people used when they lacked authority. Viktor had authority woven into his DNA. "Sit down. I have calls to return, and your 9 o'clock meeting prep. Sit." The single word hung in the air. Elena froze, mid-step, conflict playing across her features. She was weighing options, calculating risks, deciding whether obedience or flight was the safer choice. After a long moment, she turned back and lowered herself into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. She sat on the edge of the seat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap, ready to bolt at any moment. Viktor had seen this posture before, in his early days, when he'd had to extract information from people who didn't want to talk. The defensive crouch of someone who'd learned that survival sometimes meant making yourself smaller, less noticeable, less of a target. He didn't like seeing it in Elena. She was smart, capable, educated. She had a master's degree in business administration from Boston College. For God's sake. She should be confident, assertive. Instead, she looked like she wanted to disappear into the chair cushions. Viktor leaned back in his own chair, creating space, making himself less imposing. He'd learned long ago that people revealed more when they didn't feel cornered. "How did you hurt yourself?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral, conversational. "I didn't." The response came too quickly, too practiced. She'd used this line before. "I mean, it's nothing. Just bumped into something. Your collarbone." Color rose in her cheeks, a flush that spread from her neck upward. "The kitchen cabinet. I was reaching for something on a high shelf and misjudged the distance. I'm clumsy sometimes." She forced a small laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Always have been." Viktor studied her the way he studied contracts, looking for the clauses that didn't quite fit, the language that revealed the real intent beneath the surface words. Elena met his gaze for exactly 3 seconds before looking away, her eyes dropping to her hands, to the window, to the abstract art on his wall, anywhere but his face. Another tell. People who were telling the truth about something innocuous maintained eye contact. They didn't have anything to hide, but Elena was hiding something, and that something terrified her more than he did. "Elena," he said gently, "I've broken my collarbone twice. Once in a boxing match when I was 19, once in a car accident when I was 26. I know exactly what impact bruising looks like on that part of the body, the spread pattern, the color gradient, the way it fades." He paused, letting that sink in. "That's not from a cabinet. That's from something, or someone, hitting you with considerable force." Her hands tightened in her lap, knuckles going white. For just a moment, he saw something flash across her face. Surprise that he'd noticed. Fear that he was digging deeper, in something else. Relief, maybe? The smallest hint that part of her wanted someone to notice, to care, to help. But then it was gone, replaced by that practiced mask of composed professionalism. "I'm very clumsy, Mr. Castellan. I always have been. Ask anyone who knows me." Another forced smile. "In college, I once tripped over my own feet and broke my wrist. Another time, I walked into a glass door. I don't have the best spatial awareness. Are you? Am I what? Clumsy?" Viktor leaned forward now, resting his elbows on the desk. "In 4 months of working for me, you've never been clumsy, not once. You've never spilled coffee, dropped a file, knocked over a pen, or bumped into furniture. You move through spaces like a dancer, economical, precise, aware of everything around you." He watched her face as he spoke. "You're one of the most careful, controlled people I've ever employed. So forgive me if I don't believe you suddenly became clumsy enough to inflict that kind of injury on yourself." Silence filled the office. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston was waking up. Cars filling the streets, people hurrying to work, the city beginning its daily rhythm. But in this room, time seemed suspended. Elena sat frozen, barely breathing, her face a mixture of fear and something like desperation. "Elena," Viktor said softly, "someone hurt you." The words hung between them like a confession. Elena's breath caught audibly. For a long moment, Viktor thought she might tell him the truth. Her lips parted, trembled slightly. He saw the war happening behind her eyes, the desperate need to confide in someone battling against whatever was keeping her silent. Fear, shame, threats, all of the above. Probably. Her hands trembled in her lap now, the careful composure cracking. Viktor could see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to decide if he was safe to trust. And God, he wanted her to trust him. Wanted her to understand that she didn't have to carry this alone anymore. But then, something shifted in her expression. The walls went back up, brick by brick. She stood abruptly, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands. "I really should get back to work. The breakfast dishes need clearing, and I need to confirm your 2 o'clock meeting with the Meridian Group representatives. Elena." "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Castellan." Her voice was tight now, strained. "I really do appreciate it. But I'm fine. I promise." She was already backing toward the door, moving with that same controlled precision that now looked like barely restrained panic. Viktor stood, but he didn't approach, didn't want to spook her further. "Elena, listen to me. You work in my home, under my roof. That means you're under my protection. Do you understand what I'm saying?" She froze, with her hand on the doorknob, her back to him. For a moment, she was completely still. Then she turned her head slightly, not quite looking at him. "It won't happen again," she said quietly. "The cabinet thing, I'll be more careful, I promise." And then she was gone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded final, absolute. Viktor stood alone in his office, the breakfast tray untouched, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating empty space where Elena had been standing. Through the glass, he could see his reflection, a man in an expensive suit, standing in an expensive office with all the power and resources in the world. And yet, he couldn't help one scared woman who was too terrified to ask for help. But that wasn't quite true, was it? He could help. He had resources, connections, power that extended into corners of Boston that most people didn't even know existed. He'd built an empire on knowing how to solve problems, how to remove obstacles, how to protect what was his. And Elena Reeves, whether she understood it yet or not, was his to protect. Viktor sat down at his desk and picked up his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he needed, then pressed dial. The phone rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered. "It's 6:45 in the morning, Viktor. This better be important." "It is. My office. Now. Give me 10 minutes. 5. The line went dead. Viktor set down the phone and stood, walking to the windows. Below, Boston Harbor spread out in the early morning light. Boats bobbed in the marina. Seagulls wheeled overhead, crying their harsh morning songs. The city was waking up, millions of people starting their days, oblivious to the small drama that had just played out in his penthouse office. Somewhere, out there, someone had hurt Elena, had grabbed her, pushed her, hit her hard enough to leave bruising that would take weeks to fully heal. And she was too scared to report it, too frightened to ask for help, too convinced that she was alone. She was wrong about that last part. Viktor had learned young that the world was divided into two kinds of people, those who protected and those who prayed. His father had been neither, really, just a broken man who'd let life beat him down until there was nothing left but bitterness and bottles. But his mother had been a protector. She'd worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, had stood between Viktor and his father's drunken rages, had taught him that strength meant taking care of people who couldn't take care of themselves. She'd died when Viktor was 17, worn out from decades of hard work and harder living, and Viktor had made himself a promise at her funeral. He would never be powerless again. He would never watch someone suffer without being able to help. He would build himself into something strong enough, powerful enough, wealthy enough to protect people the way his mother had protected him. That promise had driven him for 25 years. Through the lean years, when he was building his reputation on the streets of Southie. Through the dangerous years, when he was expanding into territory that other men thought they owned. Through the transition to legitimacy, when he'd learned that power in expensive suits was just as effective as power in back alleys. And now, at 42, he had that power. He could make people disappear if he needed to, could ruin reputations with a few phone calls, could buy and sell businesses, properties, even politicians. He could definitely handle whoever had hurt Elena Reeves. 4 minutes after Viktor's call, there was a knock on his office door. "Come in." Dmitry Volkov entered and closed the door behind him with a solid thunk. He was a big man, 6'3", 230 pounds of muscle and scar, tissue, with a face that looked like it had been broken and reassembled multiple times. He wore his usual uniform: black tactical pants, black t-shirt, shoulder holster visible under a lightweight jacket. His hair was cut military short, gray starting to show at the temples, and his eyes were the cold blue of Arctic ice. Dmitry Volkov had been with Viktor for 15 years. He'd started as a driver after leaving the army, where he'd served in special forces doing things he never talked about. Within a year, Viktor had promoted him to head of security. Within 3 years, Dmitry had become one of Viktor's most trusted advisors. The man was ex-military, built like a tank, and had the useful combination of being observant, discreet, and absolutely loyal. More importantly, Dmitry understood Viktor's rules, the lines that couldn't be crossed, the code that governed how they operated. 4.5 minutes, Dmitry said, checking his watch. "You want to tell me what emergency gets me pulled away from my morning workout?" Viktor turned from the window. Elena Reeves. What do you know about her? Dimitri's expression shifted immediately from mild annoyance to alert concern. His hand moved reflexively toward his phone, already thinking about security protocols, threat assessments, defensive measures. She's hurt? Bruising on her collarbone, old enough to be fading, maybe a week to 10 days old. Major impact trauma, not accidental. Viktor walked back to his desk and sat down. She's lying about how it happened. Says she bumped into a kitchen cabinet, but she's too careful for that, too controlled. You think someone's hurting her. It wasn't a question. Dimitri had known Viktor long enough to read between the lines. I know someone hurt her. Past tense, at minimum. Whether it's ongoing, Viktor shook his head. She's terrified, Dimitri. Not just scared, genuinely terrified. And she won't tell me why. Dimitri pulled out his phone and brought up Elena's file. Every employee in Viktor's household had a file. Basic background check, references, employment history, standard procedure. He scrolled through the information, reading quickly. Elena Reeves, née Morrison, 31 years old, born in Worcester, raised by a single mother, bachelor's degree from UMass Amherst, master's from Boston College, 5 years experience as an executive assistant before coming to work for you. Previous employers gave glowing references. He paused. Married Michael Reeves 6 years ago. Divorced 18 months ago. Tell me about the divorce. Clean break, apparently. Filed on grounds of irreconcilable differences. No children. Settlement was finalized in 3 months, which is fast for Massachusetts. Suspiciously fast? Dimitri looked up from his phone, meeting Viktor's eyes. Could be. Messy divorces take time. Fight over assets, custody if there are kids, all that. 3 months suggests either both parties were eager to separate, or, he trailed, off meaningfully, or one party agreed to unfavorable terms just to get out. Exactly. Viktor drummed his fingers on the desk, a habit he had when he was thinking through problems. I want to know everything about her personal life, where she goes after work, who she sees, if anyone's bothering her or following her. And I especially want to know about the ex-husband. What he does, where he works, if there's any history of domestic violence or stalking behavior. You want me to follow her? Dimitri asked. Discreetly, very discreetly. Don't let her see you. The last thing I want is to make her feel less safe. Viktor's voice hardened. But I need to know if someone's threatening her, scaring her, hurting her. If there's a problem, I need to know about it so I can fix it. Dimitri nodded slowly, already thinking through logistics. I'll handle it personally. Start this afternoon when she leaves for the day. What about the ex-husband? Can you dig deeper on him? I'll make some calls. If there were domestic calls to police, restraining orders, anything official, I can find it. Dimitri paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. Viktor, you know this could be complicated. If there is someone hurting her and we intervene, if it's an ex-husband with his own connections, things could get messy. Viktor's face could have been carved from stone. I don't care how messy it gets. No one touches my people, Dimitri. No one. The emphasis on that last word made it clear this wasn't a request or a preference. It was an absolute. A line that couldn't be crossed. Dimitri recognized that tone. He'd heard it before, usually right before Viktor did something ruthless and inevitable. Understood. I'll have a preliminary report by this evening. Make it sooner if you can. After Dimitri left, Viktor tried to focus on work. He had a conference call with investors in London at 8, an hour-long call where he'd need to be sharp, persuasive, focused. He had a meeting with his legal team at 10 to review contracts for a new development in the Seaport District. Lunch with City Councilman Robert Chen, who owed Viktor several favors, and was about to be asked to pay one back. His afternoon was packed with meetings, calls, decisions that required his full attention. But his mind kept returning to Elena, to the fear in her eyes, to the practiced way she'd adjusted her collar, like she'd done it 1,000 times before, to the strained quality of her voice when she'd promised it wouldn't happen again. It wouldn't happen again. Not the cabinet, but whatever had actually caused that bruise. That was still out there, still a threat, still making her afraid to feel safe in her own life. Viktor Castellan had built his empire in the shadows of Boston's underworld. He owned politicians, judges, cops. His word was law in certain circles. He'd done things he couldn't take back, made decisions that kept him awake some nights. But he had rules, lines he didn't cross. And one of those lines was simple. You protected your people, always. Elena Reeves worked for him, in his home, under his roof. That meant she was under his protection, whether she'd asked for it or not. Someone had crossed that line. Viktor intended to find out who. By 6 p.m., Dmitri had his first report. They met in Viktor's private study, a soundproofed room on the building's top floor, where sensitive conversations happened. Dmitri laid a thin file on the mahogany desk. Elena Reeves, née Morrison, born in Worcester, bachelor's from UMass, master's from BC, married Michael Reeves 6 years ago, divorced 18 months ago, and that's where it gets interesting. Viktor opened the file, scanning the contents. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, Dmitri continued. But I talked to a contact in family court. Off the record, the judge presiding over the case made some notes in his private file about concerns. Elena had visible injuries during one of the hearings. When asked about them, she claimed she'd fallen. The judge didn't push it. No formal accusations were made. Without Elena pressing charges or requesting a restraining order, his hands were tied. Dmitri's expression was grim. But it gets worse. Michael Reeves is a lawyer. Corporate litigation at Brandt, Morrison, and Keller. Big firm. Connected. Viktor looked up sharply. Connected how? His senior partner, William Keller, plays golf with the police commissioner. His firm represents half the businesses in Boston's financial district. And Michael himself, Dmitri pulled out another sheet, comes from money. His father is Jonathan Reeves, retired Superior Court judge. So he's untouchable, in the conventional sense. Yes, a woman reporting her lawyer husband for abuse when he has those kinds of connections and she has no proof? Dmitri shook his head. It would go nowhere. Might even hurt her career if he decides to make things difficult. Viktor studied Elena's divorce papers. The settlement had been quick, almost suspiciously so. She'd gotten nothing. No alimony, no division of assets. Just a clean break. She was scared, Viktor said quietly. She took nothing just to get away from him. That would be my read, yes. Where does she live now? Small apartment in Dorchester. 1 bedroom, 4th floor walk-up. She moved there right after the divorce was finalized. Dmitri pulled out surveillance photos. I followed her from here this afternoon. She takes the T to Andrew Square, walks 3 blocks to her building, kept looking over her shoulder the entire time. Viktor examined the photos. Elena walking quickly, her cardigan wrapped tight around her, her head down. In one image, she was glancing backward, her face tight with anxiety. Anyone following her? Not that I could see today. But that doesn't mean no one has before. Her behavior, constant vigilance, checking behind her, choosing routes with good visibility. That's learned behavior. She's been followed before. I'd stake my life on it. Viktor set down the photos and leaned back in his chair, thinking. Elena Reeves had escaped an abusive marriage to a powerful, connected lawyer. She'd taken nothing in the divorce, just to get away clean and fast. And now, she was living in a cheap apartment in Dorchester, working as his personal assistant, trying to rebuild her life from scratch. But she was still terrified, still looking over her shoulder, still hiding bruises, which meant she wasn't free. Not really. Michael Reeves was still in the picture somehow. Has the ex-husband contacted her since the divorce? Viktor asked. That's the million-dollar question. Dmitri pulled out another sheet of paper. No restraining order on file, no documented contact through official channels, no court filings, no police reports, nothing on record. But I talked to her building superintendent. Guy named Eddie Santos, been working there 12 years. I slipped him 100 and asked if he'd noticed anything unusual. Dmitri met Viktor's eyes. He said Elena moved in 18 months ago, right after her divorce. Quiet tenant, never any problems. But about 3 months ago, he started noticing a car parked on the street outside the building. Dark blue sedan, always in the same spot, usually in the evenings or late at night, just sitting there. Viktor felt something cold settle in his chest. How often? Eddie said maybe once or twice a week for the past 3 months. Sometimes the car would be there for hours. No one ever got out. He thought about calling the cops. But you know how it is. Guy sitting in a car isn't technically doing anything illegal. Did Eddie get a plate number? Better than that. Dmitri pulled out his phone and showed Viktor a photo. I went to Dorchester myself after following Elena home. Talked to Eddie in person, got him to show me where the car usually parks. Then I checked traffic cameras in the area for the past 2 weeks. He swiped to another photo. Got a clear shot of the plate 3 days ago. The image showed a dark blue BMW sedan, Massachusetts plate, clearly visible. I ran the plate, Dmitri continued. Car is registered to Michael James Reeves. Address in Back Bay. Same guy. Viktor stared at the photo, rage building slow and cold in his chest. Michael Reeves had been stalking his ex-wife, sitting outside her apartment building, watching, making sure she knew he was still there. Psychological torture. Terror tactics designed to make her feel like she could never truly escape. 3 months, Viktor said quietly. The bruising I saw on Elena this morning, that was about a week to 10 days old, which means something happened 3 months ago that escalated the situation. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Michael Reeves didn't accept the divorce. I'm thinking he's been terrorizing Elena for months, showing up places, watching her, making her feel unsafe. Viktor's jaw tightened. And I'm thinking that about 10 days ago, he did more than just watch. Dmitri was quiet for a moment. If he got physical with her, if he assaulted her, why didn't she report it? Because he's a lawyer, with powerful connections and a retired judge for a father. Because she knows exactly how that would play out. Her word against his firm's lawyers destroying her credibility, his father's friends in the justice system making sure nothing sticks. Viktor stood and walked to the windows. She's smart enough to know she can't beat him through conventional channels, so she's trying to survive by staying quiet, staying invisible, hoping he eventually loses interest. Will he? Men like Michael Reeves don't lose interest, Dmitri. They escalate. He's already escalated from watching to physical assault. Next time will be worse. Viktor turned back to face his security chief. I want surveillance on Michael Reeves. 24/7. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, if he goes anywhere near Elena, and pull his phone records for the last 6 months. I want to know if he's been calling her. Phone records aren't exactly legal to obtain. I don't care. Viktor's voice was flat, absolute. Someone hurt Elena. If it's the ex-husband, I need proof. If it's someone else, I need to know who. Either way, this ends now. Dmitri stood, gathering the file. I'll have more by tomorrow. Full surveillance setup on Michael Reeves. Phone records, financial records, if I can get them. Anything that might give us leverage. Dmitri, Viktor called as his security chief reached the door. Be careful. If Michael Reeves is as connected as you say, we need to be smart about this. No mistakes, no traces back to us. When have I not been smart? Dmitri's grin was wolfish. I didn't survive 3 tours in Afghanistan by being sloppy. That's why I hired you? After Dmitri left, Viktor stood alone in his study, the city lights glittering below. His mind was already working through scenarios, strategies, contingencies. Michael Reeves was a problem, a dangerous one, but he was also protected by power, connections, and the legal system he'd spent his career mastering. Going after him directly would be complicated, would require precision, leverage, and the kind of strategic thinking that had built Viktor's empire in the first place. But Viktor had something Michael Reeves didn't have. He had resources that extended into places the law couldn't reach. He had connections in the shadows, and he had the absolute certainty that came from protecting something that belonged to him. Elena Reeves was under his protection now, and Viktor Castellan always protected what was his. The next morning arrived with autumn rain, heavy drops spattering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Viktor's penthouse. Elena arrived at 6:25 a.m., 5 minutes early as always, her hair damp despite the umbrella she carried. She wore another high-necked blouse, this one dark blue with a delicate pattern, and a scarf wrapped around her throat. The bruising was probably still visible, Viktor thought, still reminding her every morning in the mirror of what had been done to her. Good morning, Mr. Castellan. Your schedule for today. She handed him a printed itinerary, her movements precise and professional as always. If she was nervous about yesterday's conversation, she didn't show it. But Viktor could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she held herself, like she was braced for impact. Thank you, Elena. He took the schedule, glancing at it briefly. Actually, I wanted to discuss something with you. He saw her tense further, saw the micro-expression of worry that flashed across her face before she controlled it. Of course. Viktor set down the schedule and leaned back in his chair, keeping his posture relaxed, unthreatening. I'm expanding operations over the next 6 months. More properties, more deals, more moving parts. It's going to mean longer hours, more complexity, more demands on my time. I understand. I can adjust my schedule accordingly. I appreciate that. But what I'm saying is, I need my personal assistant to be available for occasional after-hours work. Dinners with clients, evening meetings with investors, weekend site visits to properties, that sort of thing. He paused, watching her reaction. It would mean a significant raise, 30%, and I'd provide a car service for any evening work, so you don't have to worry about the tea or paying for ride shares. Elena blinked, clearly caught off guard. That's very generous, Mr. Castellan. You're efficient, discreet, and you anticipate what I need before I ask for it. Those are rare qualities, Elena. Invaluable qualities. Viktor kept his tone businesslike, professional. But the expanded role does mean late nights sometimes, weekend work occasionally. If that's a problem for your personal life, I understand. I can find someone else for the extended hours and keep you in your current role. No, she said quickly, too quickly. No, that's not a problem. My personal life is very flexible right now. Translation: she didn't have a personal life, didn't have friends she saw regularly, didn't have family in the area, didn't have anything tying her down, because when you were in hiding, When you were trying to stay invisible, you didn't build connections. Connections were vulnerabilities. Good. I'll have HR draw up a new contract. The raise will be retroactive to the beginning of this month, and the car service will be available to you starting today, even for personal use, if you need it. Mr. Castellan, that's really too much. It's practical, Viktor interrupted gently. If you're going to be working longer hours, you need reliable transportation. Besides, I have a corporate account with the service. It costs me nothing to add another authorized user. That wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. Consider it a benefit of the expanded role. Elena studied him for a long moment, and Viktor could see her trying to figure out if there was an ulterior motive. She was smart enough to know that 30% raises and personal car services didn't usually come without strings attached. "Is there anything else you need from me?" she asked carefully. Viktor almost told her the truth, that he knew about Michael, knew about the stalking, knew she was in danger, but he held back. She wasn't ready to hear that yet. And more importantly, he didn't have enough leverage yet to guarantee he could end the threat permanently. So instead, he smiled slightly. "Just keep doing what you're doing, Elena. You're already excellent at your job. The raise just reflects that." After she left, Viktor picked up his phone and texted Dmitri. "Speed up the investigation. I want everything on Michael Reeves by end of business today. Everything." The response came back immediately. "Understood." Viktor had just given Elena a raise and a car service. To anyone else, it would look like a standard employment benefit. But Viktor knew the real reasons. Elena needed more money, so she'd have options if she needed to move suddenly, needed to disappear, needed to run. And she needed a driver, one of Dmitri's men, who could make sure she got home safely every night, who could watch for threats, who could be ready to protect her if Michael Reeves tried anything. It was protection disguised as generosity, and Elena would never have to know the real reason behind it. Viktor switched to the encrypted cell phone he used for sensitive matters. Dmitri answered on the first ring. "What did you find?" "You need to see this in person. I'm coming up." 2 minutes later, Dmitri entered Viktor's office carrying a laptop and a thick folder. His expression was grim in a way that made Viktor's instincts go on high alert. "Michael Reeves is escalating," Dmitri said without preamble. He opened the laptop and pulled up surveillance footage. "I've been monitoring his movements since yesterday afternoon. Last night, he was parked outside Elena's apartment building from 8:47 p.m. until 11:23 p.m., just sitting there in his car, watching." Viktor felt something cold settle deeper in his chest. Did he approach her? No, just watched. But here's the thing. Dmitri opened the folder and spread out several photographs on Viktor's desk. "I pulled his phone records like you asked. He's been calling Elena 3, sometimes 4 times a week for the past 6 months. Always from different numbers. Burner phones, calling cards, even office lines from his law firm. Never leaves voicemails. Just lets it ring until she either answers or doesn't. Terror tactics. Classic pattern. He's reminding her he's still there, still thinking about her, still part of her life. But he's careful. No threats, no voicemails, no texts that could be used as evidence. Just his presence, constant and inescapable." Dmitri pulled up another document on his laptop. "And it gets worse. I ran his credit cards for the past 6 months. How did you get those? Let's just say I have a friend who works in financial services and owes me a favor. Or 3. Dmitri pointed to the screen. "Look at this. Michael's been going to places Elena frequents. Coffee shop near her apartment. He shows up there twice a month. Grocery store she uses. He's there weekly. Even the dry cleaner she goes to. He's tracking her routine and inserting himself into it. Viktor studied the data, his mind cataloging the pattern. This wasn't coincidence. This was systematic stalking, carefully calibrated to terrorize, without crossing into obviously illegal behavior. Michael would claim he just happened to be in the area, just happened to need coffee or groceries at the same time. No law against shopping at the same stores as your ex-wife. But Elena would know better, would feel his presence everywhere she went, would never feel safe, never feel alone, never feel free. I also did some deeper digging into their marriage and divorce, Dmitri continued. He pulled out another set of documents, talked to some people who knew them, neighbors in the building where they lived together in Back Bay. One neighbor, Martha Henderson, said she heard arguments all the time, loud ones, things breaking. She almost called the police twice, but didn't want to get involved. Did she ever see evidence of physical abuse? She said Elena wore a lot of long sleeves and high collars, even in summer, sunglasses indoors, the kind of things that make you wonder but don't give you proof. Dimitri's jaw tightened. Another neighbor, Robert Chen, said he saw Elena in the hallway once, with a split lip. She claimed she'd walked into a door. He didn't believe her, but didn't push. Viktor felt rage, building, cold and methodical. Michael Reeves had been beating his wife for years, probably, and everyone had noticed, had wondered, had suspected, but no one had intervened. No one had protected her, until now. Does Elena know he was outside her apartment last night? Viktor asked. I don't think so. Her apartment faces the back of the building. She wouldn't have seen his car from her windows. But Viktor, Dimitri's expression was deadly serious. This guy is dangerous. He's smart, connected, and he clearly hasn't accepted that the marriage is over. This is the kind of situation that escalates. And, based on the bruising you saw on Elena, I think it already has. Tell me your theory. Dmitri leaned forward. I think about 10 days ago, Michael confronted Elena. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Boston Business Journal ran a feature story about Nexus Innovations, the tech startup that had grown from 12 employees to over 70 in just 1 year. The article featured a photo of the executive team, including Elena Reeves Martinez, Director of Operations, standing confidently beside the CEO. Viktor saw the article during his morning coffee, reading it with genuine pleasure. Elena looked radiant in the photo, confident, healthy, happy. No more shadows in her eyes, no more tension in her shoulders, just competence and strength. His phone rang. Dmitri. You see the article? Just reading it now. She's doing well, really well. Dmitri paused. You did good, Viktor. She did good. We just removed an obstacle, however you want to frame it. Viktor could hear the smile in Dimitri's voice. Michael Reeves, by the way, is still at BM&K, Maid junior partner last month. Keeps his head down, does his work, goes straight home every night. Model citizen. Good. Fear is an excellent motivator. The file? Still in the safe. Still secure. Still waiting if it's ever needed. Viktor turned the page of the newspaper. Which it won't be. You sound certain. I am. Michael Reeves learned his lesson. Men like him are fundamentally cowards. They only prey on people they think are weak, unprotected. The moment they encounter real resistance, real consequences, they fold. Viktor set down the paper. He knows I'm still watching. That's enough. After ending the call, Viktor thought about protection, empower, and the responsibility that came with both. He'd built his empire in the shadows. Yes. Done things that kept him awake some nights. Yes. Made hard choices that couldn't be unmade. Yes. But he'd also used that power to protect people who needed it. Elena wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. There was something almost redemptive about it. Using the same resources he'd built through morally gray means to do something unambiguously good. His assistant, Rebecca, who'd replaced Elena and was nearly as competent, knocked on his door. "Mr. Castellan, Mrs. Reeves Martinez is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she said you'd want to see her." Viktor stood immediately. "Send her in." Elena entered, and the change in her was even more dramatic in person than in photos. She wore a navy business suit, her hair styled professionally, her posture confident. No scarves, no high collars, no shadows. "Mr. Castellan, thank you for seeing me without notice. Elena, or should I say Mrs. Martinez now?" She smiled, and it transformed her face. "Elena is fine. We kept both names hyphenated, modern marriage and all that." She set a wrapped gift on his desk. "I wanted to bring you something, a thank you, for everything." Viktor unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed quote in elegant calligraphy. "The best protection any woman can have is courage. Elizabeth Cady Stanton." "I added my own inscription on the back," Elena said softly. Viktor turned it over, in her neat handwriting. "But sometimes, courage needs backup. Thank you for being mine. E.R. Elena, I know you won't, admit to what you did. I understand that. But I need you to know that you saved my life. Not just protected me, but actually saved my life." Her voice trembled slightly. Michael was escalating. If someone hadn't intervened when they did, I don't know if I'd be here now. Viktor set down the frame carefully. "You're stronger than you think. You would have found a way. Maybe. But I didn't have to find a way alone. Because someone decided I was worth protecting." She met his eyes. "That means everything." After Elena left, Viktor sat alone with the framed quote. He placed it on his desk where he could see it. A reminder of why his rules mattered. Why some lines couldn't be crossed. Why protecting people who couldn't protect themselves was worth any risk. His phone buzzed. A meeting in 20 minutes with investors from Singapore. A conference call after that about the waterfront development. Dinner tonight with a federal judge who owed him a favor. The work of empire building continued. But now, when Viktor looked out at Boston from his penthouse office, he thought about the invisible network of protection he'd built. The people who worked for him knew they were safe. The enemies who threatened what was his knew there were consequences. The predators who thought they were untouchable had learned otherwise. Viktor Castellan had built an empire in the shadows. But sometimes, those shadows could be protective, could shelter people who needed it, could deliver justice when the official systems failed. He'd saved Elena, and in saving her, he'd proven something important to himself. That power, even power built through questionable means, could still be used for good. That had to count for something. Viktor picked up his phone and texted Dmitri one final message. "Keep the file on MSAR secure. Forever, just in case." The response came immediately. "Understood. Some insurance policies never expire." Viktor smiled slightly and returned to work. His city, his empire, his responsibility. And if anyone else needed protection, needed someone to stand between them and the people who hurt them, needed proof that they weren't alone, Viktor Castellan would be ready. Always. Final end, Artainty, that he'd done what needed to be done. Elena was safe now, truly safe. The changes in Elena over the following weeks were remarkable. She started smiling more often. Real smiles that reached her eyes. She stopped wearing those high-necked blouses and scarves every single day. The tension that had lived in her shoulders gradually eased. She made eye contact more readily, spoke more confidently, even laughed laughed occasionally at something funny on a phone call. Viktor watched these transformations with quiet satisfaction. Dimitri's surveillance confirmed that Michael Reeves had kept his distance completely. No more drive-bys, no more calls, no contact of any kind. The evidence sat in multiple secure locations: Viktor's personal safe, Dimitri's secure facility, and, with Viktor's attorney under attorney-client privilege, insurance against Michael ever changing his mind. 3 months after the confrontation, Elena knocked on Viktor's office door one evening. "Mr. Castellan, do you have a minute?" "Of course. Come in." She entered carrying a folder, her expression serious, but not fearful. That was progress. 6 months ago, she'd have been terrified to request a private meeting. "I wanted to tell you in person," Elena said, setting the folder on his desk. "I've been offered a position, Director of Operations at a tech startup called Nexus Innovations. It's a significant opportunity. Better pay, more responsibility, equity in the company." Viktor opened the folder, scanning the offer letter. It was indeed impressive. Nearly double what he was paying her, plus benefits and stock options. "This is excellent, Elena. You should absolutely take it. I wanted to make sure you understood how much your support has meant. Not just the job and the opportunities you've given me, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "About 4 months ago, something in my life changed. Something that had been making me afraid just stopped. And I think you had something to do with that." Viktor met her eyes, seeing understanding there. She didn't know the details, but she knew. Smart woman. "Sometimes," Viktor said carefully, "obstacles in our lives get removed. That doesn't mean we weren't strong enough to overcome them ourselves. It just means someone recognized that we deserved the chance to thrive without them." Elena's eyes glistened slightly. "Thank you for everything you've never quite admitted to doing." After she left to pack up her desk, Viktor sat alone in his office. He'd just lost an excellent assistant, but Elena Reeves had gained something far more valuable: her freedom, her safety, her future. That seemed like a fair trade. 6 months later, Viktor received an invitation to a charity gala. The organization focused on helping domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives, providing legal assistance, housing support, job placement services. At the bottom of the invitation, a handwritten note: "Mr. Castellan, I'm on the board now. We're making a real difference in people's lives. Thank you for showing me that I could make a difference too. E.R." Viktor marked the event in his calendar. He'd attend, though not for recognition, just to see proof that protection, real protection, had lasting effects that rippled outward. In his safe, the file on Michael Reeves remained untouched. It hadn't been needed again. Michael had apparently chosen wisdom over obsession, career over revenge. But the file would stay there, forever, just in case, because Viktor Castellan was patient, thorough, and absolute in his protection of the people who mattered. And that would never change. A year after everything began with a glimpse of bruising on Elena's collarbone, Viktor stood at his office, windows, watching the sun rise over Boston Harbor. His phone buzzed with a text from Dimitri. "ER got married yesterday. Small ceremony, looks happy. Mr. still maintaining distance. No issues." Viktor smiled slightly. Elena Reeves had reclaimed her life completely. New job, new opportunities, new love, new future. All of it built on the foundation of safety he'd provided. Michael Reeves, meanwhile, was still at his law firm, still working his cases, still looking over his shoulder, still wondering if Viktor was watching, still knowing that one wrong move would end everything. That uncertainty was its own punishment. Better than prison, in some ways. A lifetime of knowing you'd been beaten, outmaneuvered, made powerless by someone who decided you needed to be stopped. Victor's phone buzzed again. His calendar reminder for the day. 3 morning meetings, lunch with a city councilman, site visit to the new waterfront development, evening dinner with potential investors from Tokyo, business as usual, empire building, the legitimate work that occupied most of his days now. But underneath it all, the shadows remained. The network of protection, the enforcement of rules, the certainty that Viktor Castellan protected what was his. Elena Reeves had been under his protection when she needed it. Now she was thriving beyond it, strong enough to stand on her own. That was exactly how it should be. Viktor turned from the windows and returned to his desk. There was work to do, deals to close, problems to solve. His empire didn't run itself, but for a moment, he allowed himself satisfaction. One woman was safe. One predator was permanently neutralized. One small corner of the world was slightly more just than it had been before. And if anyone else ever came within his reach, who needed that same protection, who was being terrorized by someone who thought they were untouchable, well, Viktor Castellan would be ready. After all, shadows didn't need recognition. They just needed to keep protecting what mattered. The end are her again, if you call her, if you even think about her too hard. I will make it my personal mission to destroy everything you've built. Your career, your reputation, your father's legacy, all of it. My father doesn't know what you've done, does he? Retired judges tend to have strong opinions about men who abuse their wives. I wonder how he'd feel knowing his son is a stalker. Michael's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. Viktor pulled out his phone and showed Michael a photo. Surveillance footage of Michael's car parked outside Elena's building. I have 6 months of this. Dozens of occasions where you followed her, watched her, terrorized her. It's all documented, time-stamped, admissible. One word from me, and this goes to the police, to the Bar Association, to your father, and to every media outlet in Boston. The fight went out of Michael's eyes, replaced by fear. Good. He was finally understanding the situation. What if I say, I won't comply? Michael asked, but his voice lacked conviction. Then, you'll spend the rest of your very short career looking over your shoulder, wondering when I'll move against you. You'll wake up every morning not knowing if this is the day your entire world comes apart. Viktor pocketed his phone. Or you could be smart. Walk away. Leave Elena alone. Move on with your life. It's your choice. Silence filled the conference room. Through the windows, Boston bustled below, oblivious to the confrontation happening 32 floors up. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice defeated. Fine, I'll leave her alone. I'm glad we understand each other. Viktor walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Reeves. If Elena gets so much as a wrong number call that scares her, if she sees someone following her, if she feels unsafe in any way, I'll assume it was you, and our conversation will be much less pleasant next time. I said I'll leave her alone. Good. Then we won't need to speak again. Viktor left the conference room, his expression calm and composed. But inside, satisfaction burned warm. Michael Reeves had gotten the message. The threat had been delivered with precision, backed by evidence and leverage. Now came the waiting game. Making sure Michael followed through. In the elevator down to the parking garage, Viktor texted Dmitri. Continue surveillance on Mistar. If he violates the terms of our conversation, I want to know immediately. Dmitri's response came seconds later. Understood. Viktor emerged into the parking garage, where his driver waited. As the car pulled into Boston traffic, he thought about Elena. She was at his penthouse right now, probably working on correspondence, organizing his schedule, existing in that constant state of low-level fear she'd been carrying for months. She didn't know what had just happened, didn't know that the threat hanging over her had been neutralized, at least temporarily. But soon, maybe, she'd start to feel it, that absence of fear, the lightness that came from not looking over your shoulder constantly. Viktor intended to make sure she got that chance. 2 weeks later, Elena was different. It was subtle at first. She smiled more, made eye contact, stopped wearing those high-necked cardigans and scarves every single day. The tension that had lived in her shoulders seemed to ease, degree by degree. Viktor watched these changes with quiet satisfaction. Dmitri's surveillance confirmed that Michael Reeves had kept his word. He'd stopped calling, stopped driving by Elena's apartment, stopped existing in her life entirely. The threat had been neutralized. But Viktor wanted to be sure. Permanent solutions required permanent measures. "I need you to dig deeper," he told Dmitri one evening. They were in Viktor's study, reviewing security reports. "Michael Reeves has kept his distance for 2 weeks, but I want to make sure he can't change his mind." "What are you thinking?" "Leverage, the kind that lasts." Viktor pulled up Michael's file on his computer. "He's been careful, but no one's perfect. Find something. Tax irregularities, conflicts of interest, ethics violations. Something that would end his legal career if it came to light." Dmitri studied the screen. "That could take time." "We have time. I'm patient." Viktor closed the file. "But I want insurance, Dmitri. I want something that ensures Michael Reeves never thinks about Elena again, even years from now. I'll see what I can find." Over the next month, Dmitri's team worked methodically through Michael Reeves's professional history. They found plenty of gray areas: overbilling clients, questionable legal advice that benefited his firm over his clients' interests, expense reports that didn't quite add up. But they also found something bigger. "You need to see this," Dmitri said, arriving at Viktor's office late one evening. He carried a thick folder. "Michael Reeves has been working on a case for Northbridge Development. Big commercial litigation, lots of money involved." Viktor opened the folder. And I found communications between Michael and Northbridge's CEO. They're conspiring to withhold discovery materials that could damage Northbridge's case. It's obstruction of justice, plain and simple. If this came out, Michael would be disbarred. Viktor read through the emails and text messages Dmitri had obtained. The evidence was damning. Clear coordination to hide documents, discussions about misleading opposing counsel, deliberate violations of legal ethics. "This is good," Viktor said quietly. "This is very good. What do you want to do with it?" Viktor was quiet for a moment, thinking through options. He could turn the evidence over to the Bar Association immediately, watching Michael's career implode. But that might not be strategic. Better to hold it as insurance. Make copies, store them securely, multiple locations. If Michael Reeves ever violates our agreement, if he ever approaches Elena again, this goes public immediately. But for now, we hold it. Mutually assured destruction. Exactly. Michael gets to keep his career as long as he stays away from Elena. It's a very reasonable deal. Dmitri grinned. "You're a merciful man. I'm a practical man. Dead enemies can't suffer. Michael Reeves will spend the rest of his life knowing that one wrong move will cost him everything. That's better than any punishment I could deliver directly." The evidence was secured in 3 separate locations. One in Viktor's personal safe, one with Dmitri, and one with Victor's attorney under attorney-client privilege. Michael Reeves's fate was sealed. He just didn't know it yet. 3 months after the confrontation, Viktor called Elena into his office. It was early evening, the Boston skyline glittering outside his windows. "Sit down, Elena. This isn't business." She settled into the chair, curiosity and slight concern on her face, but there was no fear. That was the important thing. The constant, low-grade terror that had lived in her eyes for months had finally faded. "I wanted to check in with you," Viktor said. "You seem happier lately." Elena looked surprised, then smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I am. I've been sleeping better, feeling safer." "Good. That's what I hoped to hear." Viktor paused, choosing his words carefully. "Elena, I know things were difficult for you before you came to work for me. I never wanted to pry, but I want you to know that if you ever feel unsafe, if anyone ever bothers you, you can tell me." She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "Mr. Castellan, can I ask you something?" "Of course. My ex-husband. He used to call me all the time. Different numbers, never leaving messages. It stopped about 3 months ago. Completely stopped." She held his gaze. "Did you have something to do with that?" Viktor considered his answer. He could lie, maintain plausible deniability, but Elena deserved honesty, at least some version of it. "Let's say I had a conversation with Mr. Reeves about professional boundaries and appropriate behavior, and let's say he understood that certain actions would have consequences he'd rather avoid. Did you threaten him?" "I gave him clarity about the situation." Elena was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I've been terrified for so long, not knowing when he'd show up, when he'd call, what he might do. And then it just stopped. I thought I was imagining it at first." "You weren't imagining anything. Michael Reeves was terrorizing you. That's ended now. Permanently? How can you be sure?" "Because I'm very good at convincing people to make smart choices." Viktor's expression was calm. "You're safe, Elena. That's what matters." She wiped her eyes, composing herself. "I don't know how to thank you. Do good work. Be happy. That's thanks enough." Viktor pulled a business card from his desk drawer and handed it to her. "This is the direct line to my head of security, Dmitry Volkov. If anyone ever bothers you, ever makes you feel unsafe, you call that number immediately, day or night. Understand?" Elena took the card, holding it carefully. "I understand." "Good. Now go home. It's late." After Elena left, Viktor sat in his office, the city lights spreading below him. Somewhere out there, Michael Reeves was probably at home, thinking about his very expensive career and very connected family, weighing whether it was worth risking everything to bother his ex-wife. Viktor hoped Michael was smart enough to make the right choice. But if he wasn't, Viktor was ready. 6 months passed. Elena thrived. She took on more responsibilities, became more confident, started dressing in brighter colors. The scared, careful woman who'd first walked into Viktor's office had been replaced by someone who laughed easily and met challenges head-on. Viktor watched these changes with quiet satisfaction. This was why he had rules, why he protected his people, because everyone deserved the chance to live without fear. Dmitry's surveillance confirmed that Michael Reeves had maintained his distance. No calls, no drive-bys, no contact of any kind. The man had apparently decided his career was more valuable than his obsession with his ex-wife. Smart choice. But Viktor kept the evidence on file anyway. Insurance policies were only valuable if you never had to use them, but they needed to exist nonetheless. One evening, As Viktor was preparing to leave his office, Elena knocked on his door. "Mr. Castellan? Do you have a moment?" "Of course. Come in." She entered, carrying an envelope. "I wanted to give you this personally." Viktor took the envelope, opening it. Inside was a letter, elegant script on quality paper. "I've been offered a position," Elena said, "director of operations at a tech startup. It's a significant opportunity. Better pay, more responsibility, room for advancement." Viktor read the letter, feeling an unexpected twinge of, what? Not quite disappointment. More like the bittersweet recognition that something good was ending. "This is excellent, Elena. You should take it. I wanted to tell you personally, because—" She paused, searching for words. "You changed my life, Mr. Castellan. 6 months ago, I was terrified, barely functioning, jumping at shadows. You gave me safety when I didn't even know how to ask for it. I'll never forget that. You earned your safety, Elena, by being strong enough to leave a bad situation. I just helped remove obstacles. You did more than that." She met his eyes. "You showed me that not all powerful men use their power to hurt people. Some use it to protect." Viktor was quiet for a moment, touched by her words. "When do you start?" 2 weeks. I'll help transition everything. Make sure my replacement is fully trained." "Good. And Elena, if you ever need anything, a reference, advice, help of any kind, you call me. That protection doesn't end just because you stop working here." "Thank you." She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd reclaimed their life. "For everything." After Elena left, Viktor sat alone in his office, thinking about protection and power and the responsibility that came with both. He'd built an empire on being ruthless, on making hard choices, on existing in the shadows where the law didn't always reach. But those same shadows could be used for more than just enriching himself. They could shelter people who needed it. They could deliver justice when the system failed. Michael Reeves would spend the rest of his life one wrong move away from losing everything, and he'd never know for certain whether Viktor was still watching. That uncertainty was its own punishment, and Elena Reeves would move forward with her life, free from fear, able to be the person she'd always had the potential to be. Viktor stood and walked to the windows, looking out at Boston, his city, his empire, his responsibility. Somewhere out there, other people were afraid. Other victims were suffering. Other predators were hiding behind respectability and connections. Viktor Castellan couldn't save everyone, but he could save the ones who came within his reach. And that, he thought, was enough. 2 weeks later, on Elena's last day, she came to Viktor's office one final time. "Everything's transitioned," she reported. "Your new assistant, Rebecca, is excellent. She'll take good care of you." "I'm sure she will." Viktor stood and came around his desk. "Elena, before you go, I want you to have something." He handed her a small box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny shield. "For protection," Viktor said quietly, "so you never forget that you're stronger than anyone who ever tried to hurt you." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I won't forget, ever." They shook hands, and Viktor realized he was genuinely going to miss her, not just as an assistant, but as someone who'd reminded him why his rules mattered. After Elena left, Viktor returned to his desk. There was work to do, deals to close, problems to solve. His empire didn't run itself, but for a moment, he allowed himself satisfaction. One woman was safe. One predator was neutralized. One small corner of the world was slightly more just than it had been before. Viktor Castellan returned to work, the city spreading below him, ready for whatever came next. After all, shadows didn't need recognition. They just needed to keep protecting what mattered. The end. Epilogue. 1 year later, Viktor received an invitation to a charity gala. The organization focused on helping domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives. At the bottom of the invitation, a handwritten note. "Mr. Castellan, I'm on the board now. We're making a difference. Thank you for showing me I could. E.R." Viktor smiled and marked the event in his calendar. He'd attend, not for recognition, but to see proof that protection, real protection, had lasting effects. In his safe, the file on Michael Reeves remained untouched. It hadn't been needed. Michael had apparently chosen wisdom over obsession, career over revenge, but the file would stay there. Forever, just in case. Because Viktor Castellan was patient, thorough, and absolute in his protection of the people who mattered. And that would never change. Final end.